966.
My one big thing, Lucian, I kind of feel like I'm in high school recently. This is the third week in a row I'm doing, in essence, a book report. 2 weeks ago, it was a 78-page Ministry of Investments second quarter report. Last week, it was IMF's 91-page article for consultation for Saudi Arabia. This week, the War and Peace of United Nations publications, the 540-page 2022 World Migration Report. I think it's a problem. I come across, we find an interesting article or story and we, check the source material, do some research, and end up with a book report. So anyway, the 2022 Migration Report is actually really interesting, and I've never looked into one before. And this one is, like so many of the publications we're seeing, just really well organized and with really top level graphics and charts. But top line findings are: one, there are around 281 million international migrants in the world in 2020, which equates to 3.6% of the global population. This is a small minority of the world's population, meaning that staying within one's country of birth remains overwhelmingly the norm. The great majority of people do not migrate across borders. Much larger numbers migrate within countries, although we have seen this slow over the past years due to COVID-19. Two, since 1970, the U.S. has been the primary country of destination for migrants. Since 1970, the number of foreign-born people residing in the U.S. has more than quadrupled, from less than 12 million in 1970 to close to 50.6 million in 2019. Now, Saudi Arabia makes its way into this UN World Migration Report in a number of interesting ways, which obviously is why this book report is in the 966. The two data points regarding Saudi Arabia and global migration that are especially interesting are the first, in terms of the top destination countries in the world for immigration, Saudi Arabia comes in third with 13 million migrants in 2020, following the U.S. at 43 plus million and Germany at 4.2 million. Ahead of Russia, 11.6, the UK, 8.9, the UAE, 8.4, and France, 8.1 million. Second, Saudi Arabia also places third globally in terms of remittances, with 34.6 billion in 2020. The U.S. leads at 68 billion, and at number two is...
I didn't read the book for the book report, so I don't know.
Well, yeah, it shows your good judgment. But interesting, because the UAE is second at 43.2 billion.
Interesting.
And once again, there'll be a quiz. I didn't tell you there'll be a quiz at the end. So it's just, once again, Saudi Arabia finds itself sort of at the center of an important global phenomenon. We see it with energy, climate matters, regional and global security, finance and investment, and here with migration patterns. So in closing, a couple of quotes from the report I thought that was interesting. Remember, this is a 540-page report. There's lots of good stuff in here. Quote, long-term data on international migration have taught us that migration is not uniform across the world, but is shaped by economic, geographic, demographic, and other factors, resulting in distinct migration patterns, such as migration corridors. The largest corridors tend to be from developing countries to larger economies, such as those of the United States, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Germany. And second one, while it is unclear exactly how migration patterns will be affected, analysis points to significant shifts over time as countries seek to invest in artificial intelligence, AI. These changes are likely to affect many labor markets globally. In a report focusing on Bahrain, Egypt, Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, for example, researchers found that the automation of routine work is particularly relevant to migrant workers in these countries. In the United Arab Emirates, for example, more than 93% of automation potentially affects jobs held by migrant workers.
Richard, the 966 is now a book club, and you read the book report. Yeah. You read the book, issue a report. I listen, get slightly smarter. The listeners listen, get slightly smarter. No, this report is really cool. It's very long, as you noted, but it does have some incredible data in it. Just to add some of the things that because I did glance over it, some of the things I thought were really interesting. The global remittance market, the total number of remittances sent around is $700 billion. That's a lot of money going cross borders. There are a lot of startups and now publicly traded companies that deal specifically in Remittances. It used to be Western Union. Now it's companies like Remitly and other businesses like that service this market. Really interesting stuff there. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about this report, Richard, is that on page 27 in figure 3, they actually break down the top migration country to country corridors. And Mexico to the United States is number one by a lot. It's just under 12 million people a year, which dwarfs the next, which is Syria to Turkey, that is fascinating. And then Saudi Arabia first comes up, I guess, ninth on this list, and the number one migrant source for Saudi Arabia is India. So it's the India to Saudi Arabia corridor. Richard, also when looking at this, I was sort of thinking about Nitakat and the Saudiization of the labor market. That's still a lot of immigrants and migrants coming into Saudi Arabia when Saudi Arabia is actively trying to get Saudis into jobs. So it's sort of interesting to think about it in that context. There's still a huge immigrant inflow into Saudi Arabia.
Well, there is. And I think it's interesting in so many ways. And in figure 3, just to go back to this report, one of the ways it's really well laid out is it will juxtapose patterns. So, for example, not only have immigration over, in 5-year intervals, it'll have in the same chart emigration. So you see movements from country to country, and you see that sort of thing. Same thing with remittances. Who's receiving them, who's sending them. This was an interesting. So that the chart you pulled was interesting. That's referring to the migration corridors. It brings up several things. MBS, when we was talking about the line, introduced that, but recently when he talked about it again, he laid out population goals. To have 50 million by 2030, 100 million by some. I'm not sure what it was, but significant, but 50-50, between expat and Saudi. Obviously those, I don't think he foresees that all being, laborers, but a whole variety of non-Saudis. And they clearly have, immigration patterns that contribute to, a large expat community. The other thing is remittances, and this is in the region in Gulf. Obviously, this is largely based on the Hawala system, which is an age-old system of how people get money home to their families. You mentioned, Nitakat, but the Hawala system is another system I can see being significantly revised and updated and becoming digitized in a manner that it isn't now. Anyway, these, as I mentioned, Saudi Arabia finds itself at the heart of significant, global phenomenon. And this is one of them. They'll be dealing with migration, and Nitakat is Saudization. There won't be, if in terms of the plans that Saudi Arabia has for itself, the native population isn't going to be able to take, pick up all the slack in terms of what's needed in the workforce. So the immigration population, I expect will grow and evolve, and we'll see more of it.
Yeah, we're going to include a link to this in the on the YouTube page. It'll also be in the show notes. It's kind of worth opening up, even if you're just looking at the graphs that are in it. I mean, I'm looking at one right now that shows global air travel over time starting in 1945, and then it just continually goes up until 2020 when the pandemic hit, and just goes straight down. It's kind of we all knew that, but it's sort of shocking to see.
All right, but you just caught the bug. See what happens when you get into this report. There's a lot of good stuff.
It's like showing up to book club and wishing you had read the book because everybody's so excited about it.
Oh my goodness, this is as good as it was billed.
So we'll put this report up there. We'll share a few of these graphics. The report is really long. It's from the UN. Richard, I think the UN Migration Agency merged with the UN, or is a subset with the UN. It's in 2016. I had the note up here and now I can't find it, but this is part of the United Nations, sort of, right? Organization.
It's a UN International Migration Report.
Yeah, cool. Well, it's very comprehensive, very cool stuff. Check it out. So we'll have a link to that on, if you're listening to us as a podcast, if you go to the show page or wherever you hit play, there should be a list of things that say show notes. And in there, there'll be little timestamps. I'm sorry, I always throw these little plugs in there, but there'll be little timestamps where you can jump directly to a conversation topic if it's interesting to you. And that's usually where we throw all of our links in. So check that out. And on YouTube, it'll just be right there in the description. If we ever forget, we usually get a few commenters who say, where is the report you talked about? And I realize, well, I maybe need to sleep a little bit more because I definitely forgot. So very interesting stuff.